A lot of narratives have been going on this week after the 49ers' disappointing loss to the Kansas City Chiefs. Good news is we got Jack Hammer in to talk about all the narratives and more, and there's a game coming up against a division rival to make everything okay. Stay tuned. We're going to talk about it all next. What is up, fam? Thank you so much for tuning in to So Real Sports Talk TV. I am your host, So Real Sunil, and we have a real special show. Got my man from the Santa Clara Press Democrat, one of those. Definitely a Press Democrat writer. My man, Jack Hammer. Jack, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm good, Sunil. It's the Santa Rosa Press Democrat, and it's a good Friday.
I love it. And I do want to apologize. I got a little bit of an eye infection. I'm pointing to my eye saying ear. Eye infection. So if you see a little droopage on this side, it's that. Everything's A-okay. Should be cleared up in a couple of days. But I try to turn it all the way red, Jack, just to be in honor of the 49ers this weekend. Obviously, we have a lot to talk about, especially with I believe, a must-win game this Sunday with the Rams, and we'll definitely get into that, Jack. First, let me shout out some of the audience members. CJ Gray, let's do this, Sunil. We are absolutely going to do it. Raphael 562 Niners, what's up, Sunil? And everyone, like and subscribe. Please do. Will you be at the game, Sunil and Jack? I am definitely going to be at the game because it's right here in my backyard. Jack, you coming down for it?
I'll be there.
Oh my goodness. The whole squad might be together. I'm actually going to see Jack in real life. Jack IRL. That's going to be great. Well, Jack, I want to start with this. Kyle Shanahan amongst the 49er faithful. It's starting to get pretty loud out there with a lot of people kind of naysaying whether or not Shanahan is the right guy for the job at this point. Clearly, the team has been disappointing this season. And even though there's been success, you've mentioned it multiple times, Kyle Shanahan still hasn't had back-to-back winning seasons as a coach for the 49ers. There hasn't been just the consistent success year after year after year. With this, I guess, loss from Kansas City and just overall with as much talent as this team have to be underperforming at this point in the season, is Kyle Shanahan's brand and legacy taking a hit?
I think it's getting beat up a little bit. Yeah, so definitely it's taking a hit. 49ers are struggling on offense. It's hard to be looked at as a top level NFL head coach when your offense is scoring just over 20 points a game, bottom half of the league. One of the most penalized offenses in the league, one of the worst in terms of turnovers, whether it's interception percentage or fumbles lost. It's been a rough start for the year for Kyle Shanahan's offense, that's for sure.
And Jack, I saw somebody mention this. I forget who it was, but it was somebody on ESPN, but they were kind of making Jimmy the scapegoat out of this. But they talked about all pro at left tackle, all pro at wide receiver, all pro at tight end, all pro at fullback. Now you have an all pro at running back, first round draft pick on the opposite side of wide receiver as well. I know the easy thing to say is Jimmy is the reason. How, when you have this much talent, you would think that any quarterback could be successful, and and clearly the team isn't performing like a team with all of that talent. How much of this do you put on Jimmy? How much of this is a Kyle Shanahan thing?
I think it's a good combination of both. It's a Garoppolo thing. It's a Shanahan thing. It's a Debo Samuel thing. It's a George Kittle thing. It's a 49ers offense thing. And Jimmy Garoppolo is the easy one to point to. And yeah, he has an all-pro at wide receiver. And guess what? That all-pro at wide receiver is leading the league in drops. He's one of the reasons why the 49ers are second in the NFL in terms of drops when it comes to drop percentage. And that's the best way to look at this for the 49ers, because they don't throw the ball as much as some of these other teams do. So when they have a higher, when they have the same number of drops as a team that throws the ball more than them, it affects their offense even more. And Debo Samuel, for as good as he is as a wide receiver and a running back, he puts the ball on the ground, whether it's a fumble or lack of being able to hold on to the passes. He's not on his own, but it's you look at the offense and there's a wide variety of things that are holding them back.
So Jack, I'm a big Kyle Shanahan proponent. I would call myself a Shanahan, and I still have a lot of faith in him, but it's hard to defend when there is a lot of talent and it's the consistent, it's the same thing year after year after year, right? Same inability to score. Offense seems to be the weakest link when compared to the defense. And yeah, with the amount of talent that's on the team, to just not be performing at the level that they need to, the buck at the end of the day has to end with Shanahan. Can this be fixed though, Jack? I know you're somebody who isn't as high on Shanahan as I am. You do criticize some of his game management and decision making, but I know you're also level-headed, and you do see, some of the, do see positives in him as well. What does Shanahan need to do to get back to, I guess, the legacy, or not even the legacy, but let's say the brand he had coming into the position as head coach for the 49ers?
Well, as far as coming into the position, when he took the job with the 49ers, that's a tough one. I think you look at where they are right now. Part of the reason that they're struggling is lack of execution, right? And that's what happens. You hear him talk about lack of execution a lot, and and I don't like that excuse. I think that it has to do with a lot of turnover on his coaching staff. He's had a tremendous amount of turnover in the last couple of years. Robert Saleh, Mike LaFleur, even a couple of years ago. A mass exodus this year that's left him with basically just Shanahan and Chris Verster being in the same spots this year as they were last year on this offensive staff. And it's just a whole combination of things that are happening to get this going. And for Kyle Shanahan himself, if you want to point to one specific thing with just Kyle Shanahan and not include his assistants, which obviously he's hiring those guys too, right? But if you want to just point to one thing with Kyle Shanahan, is, for me, he's not following his own advice. He said earlier this week, his goal is to be balanced on offense, run pass about the same as, on both sides. And then not doing that is what usually leads to turnovers and mistakes. And you go through the last 5 weeks, and it's not even close in terms of the run pass. And it's not even just a number. It's not even the easy thing to do when you talk about that imbalance in the run pass ratio is to talk about their needing to pass because they're behind. And that's not the truth. That's not the case either. And they've gone away from the run in games when they've been ahead, or in games in which they've been within one score. So he's putting a lot of faith in Jimmy Garoppolo, and Jimmy Garoppolo is not, we know who Jimmy Garoppolo is, and I think he should too.
TC has a question at Sunil Jack. It's over for Kyle Shanahan for sure. Locker room over this clown. How can't you see that at Sunil, like, for real? So I guess TC is trying to say that the locker room doesn't respect Kyle Shanahan, and I'm blind to it. I don't know if it's the locker room necessarily. I think winning solves all. Obviously, coming off of a big, pretty bad loss to Kansas City. The narrative is always changing. When they're on a 2-game winning streak, everything is amazing. Jimmy G is the greatest quarterback. Kyle Shanahan is the greatest coach. And then you rattle off a couple losses. All of a sudden, Kyle Shanahan is a clown. I never respected him. I always knew he wasn't the right one. So, as far as a fan base, we tend to be on the roller coaster week after week with this team. But you did mention that, and I do agree with you that Kyle Shanahan's offense looks a lot better when they do focus on the running game. And I'll go a little bit out of order because last week was the first week in a while, I think since the first game of the season, where we had, I guess, all of the starters, quote unquote, starters on the offensive line together, with Trent Williams coming back. So we had our, star left tackle. We had, McGlinchey and Williams playing at the same time. And I know going into the season, Jack, we talked a lot about the offensive line, and both of us weren't as worried about the offensive line as maybe some of the other fan base. And most of that was because we did believe with those tackles there on the outside, they'll be able to anchor the offensive line and they'll be fine. Overall, I think they have been fine, but they definitely weren't fine against Kansas City. Both Trent Williams and McGlinchey had terrible games. What went wrong with the offensive line? And is this a temporary thing, or do you think that they can get it together and, be okay moving forward?
I don't think the offensive line played bad against Kansas City. I know they gave up some more hits and things like that, but that's what happens when you have a defense that's sending more guys than you have to block. When there's 5 guys to block and they're sending 6, somebody's going to come free and somebody's going to hit the quarterback. And so, and in the run game, I thought the 49ers were running the ball well, and Kyle Shanahan just decided not to run the ball because the running backs averaged over 5 yards a carry in that game.
Mm-hmm.
You watch that game. When I watch that game back and I'm looking at it, I'm seeing blitzes that aren't getting, that you can't pick up because you just have too many guys coming, and the quarterback's got to get the ball out of his hand, and he's either not hitting the hot read or there's no one for him to throw the ball to. And there's instances of both of that. And so, again, I don't think the offensive line was the problem against Kansas City. I think the Chiefs just decided they were going to, they weren't going to. Steve Spagnuolo is known for being a heavy blitzer and being a guy that's going to take risks. And he did that. He threw it at it, and he's in Jimmy Garoppolo, that had an interception and 5 sacks. And I think Garoppolo, gets the blame on the interception. And some of those sacks, I think, are just a matter of the play design on Shanahan's part.
So if you're saying, and I mean, I trust your analysis because you're way better at the X's and O's and watching the film and stuff like that. So I'll just say from a layman's term, it didn't look good, Jack. So whether or not where that problem came, it makes sense if it was constantly just, more men than can be blocked by the 5 men on the offensive line. But who do you put that blame on? Like, is that a issue with Jimmy not reading the blitz coming in and not getting out of the play quick enough? Is that Shanahan not understanding what's going on and, changing up the scheme or the protection or whatnot to be able to help, Jimmy get some more time? Like, who's that blame on? Or is that just like something at the line of scrimmage that needs to be read by whoever is reading it? Like, explain to us why that happened, because it never got fixed. There was never, like, even late into the game where they figured it out. So who does that blame go to?
It's a tough one because it's a little bit of both. That if you go to let's go to the interception, for example. I put the blame of the interception on Jimmy Garoppolo. I think in that instance, in the way that play call is designed up, that the hot read, if Jimmy Garoppolo sees blitz coming prior to snap, the ball is supposed to go to Jeff Wilson Jr. quick, because the other receivers aren't going to be able to get there in time because of the routes they're running. They're running return routes, which is where they're going inside and then back out, right? Mm-hmm. And they're not going to be able to get into that where they're hitting their break and twist and go back outside quick enough for Garoppolo to throw them the ball, which is why he tried to get it over the top to to Kittle, who was the only one who was running a regular route over on that left side.
Right.
I would say in that situation, he needs to see the blitz coming. It was pretty clear pre-snap. In looking at it, you could see everybody walking up. And as soon as that ball snapped, you're looking to see if those guys are coming. If they're coming, you get it, you turn and you throw it to Jeff Wilson. You don't even worry about the left side. So that's one on Garoppolo. One of the sacks earlier in the game, I think it's the one. It might be the one that no, it wasn't the one on McGlinchey. It was they brought a man off the right side. It was number 50, came unblocked off the edge and sacks him. On that one, you have an unblocked man, and Garoppolo's hot read, if looking at it, was probably over to the left side. He's reading the right. He's reading the two tight end side where he's got, I think it was Kittle running a deeper route, and then he had Charlie Warner running the return route on the right side. There's no way that he's going to get the ball out on time in that one. So it's a play design thing, or it's a Jimmy Garoppolo thing. It kind of goes back and forth between those two, because on the one that he did get sacked on, where the guy's coming free from the right side, the only way that Garoppolo gets that ball out of his hand is if he sees him coming quick and he turns and works completely to the other side of the field, like now, to get it over to Christian McCaffrey. I think it was in the left flat. And I don't think he's going to be able to turn around and make that throw quick enough.
I got it. So it's kind of more situational at certain points. It's on one person on a certain point. That's kind of tough. Hopefully it is something that moving forward is changed, because reality is I don't think Kansas City is really known for like this crazy defensive line. They do have talent there, obviously, and they seem to have the 49ers number when it comes to adjustments and understanding the game plan, or having a game plan that's effective against the 49ers. Let's stick to coaching, though.
Well, real quick.
Right, yeah, go ahead.
Like, since we're there, but part of it too is execution, and it's the first drive, you're inside the red zone, it's 3rd and 3, and Brandon Ayuk's got to get open. It's the read. Everything takes you to Brandon Ayuk, because they're running double slants on the right side. The safety's way over on the other side of the field. It's there to be made, and you're the guy who everybody says is such a playmaker, Brandon Ayuk, doesn't get open, and so the throw is out in front of him. It hits his hands. It's a tough catch because it has to be out in front of him because he's covered so well, and it's an incompletion. It's stuff like that throughout the game that you see. Then you see it adding up. At 3rd and 7, George Kittle taking forever to get out of his route, and really he's so slow at the stem of his route on that 3rd and 7 that when he finally gets to the out part of his cut, the linebacker is able to stick with him. And you watch that when he takes about 5 steps between the time he starts to break down and the time he actually cuts. It's extremely slow. And so now the linebacker is there. The linebacker grabs his arm, and it's a good throw by Garoppolo, but all Kittle's able to do is get one arm on it. We have this perception of these guys as these playmakers. I'm talking about Ayuk and Samuel and George Kittle and especially those three. And those guys are causing a lot of problems in this offense by drops, not getting into the routes, not running the routes. It's all over the film. And it's easy to blame Jimmy Garoppolo for everything because he's the quarterback, and that's what everybody does. But when you look at it, there's obviously Jimmy Garoppolo is making mistakes. It's his fault that he throws the ball into the ground to Brandon Ayuk on a screen to the left side. It's his fault that he throws the ball at Ayuk's feet on an in route earlier in the game. But there's so many other things that go into it other than just those plays, and that's what makes this it's a very nuanced, very long conversation to really get into what's happening.
Yeah, and sticking to that point, because I think this is a really great topic. Brandon Ayuk came out and after the game and talked about how with all the talent there, for them to be under performing, and I'm paraphrasing, you need to get the ball into the hands of the playmakers more. And I don't know. I don't think he was necessarily taking a shot. I just think that he thinks that's the solution. So from what you're saying, Jack, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but how I'm understanding it is you're saying that is it more on these playmakers that they're making it harder to get the ball into their hands? Or do you agree with Brandon Ayuk that maybe there's not enough of a concerted effort to get the ball into these guys' hands?
they need to. There is a concerted effort to get the ball into their hands. You can see that by the number of times that they've thrown to them in the last couple of weeks. The 49ers always put out, information, and it's always positive information on the team. And I think it's Ayuk and Kittle. They're on pace to have the most targets and receptions of a duo over the last, I don't know, a few years, right? So they're getting the ball in their hands. The problem is that there's a lack of consistency on this offense, and some of it is from their side. You talked about me watching film and all that kind of stuff, and I took some time this morning to watch some film stuff that Kurt Warner put together, and he made some really good points as things that the 49ers aren't doing right. One of them is, I don't remember if this was a fumble or not, but it's a route where you have George Kittle running a deep post down the middle, and you have Brandon Ayuk running a route over the middle, and Garoppolo looks to the middle, which is where his first read is. He comes back to Ayuk. The hole is there for Ayuk, but Ayuk is covered. There's nowhere for him to throw the ball. And basically, like what he's saying is, what do you want Garoppolo to do here? And he also points to the route that Ayuk is running, and Ayuk taking, Ayuk, it's going to be an incoming route, in cutting route for Ayuk. He's going to be running a 15, 20 yard in route. Well, he takes an outside release. And because he takes an outside release, the cornerback is running right underneath him. And so then when he makes his in cut, the cornerback is underneath him. And so, Warner says, you can't throw the ball there because you don't know if he's going to get open. And you look up the other side of the screen, and the other receiver is doing exactly the same thing. And that's Ray McLeod. He's doing the same exact thing. He's taking an outside release. He wins on his route, but that's not where the read is supposed to go, And from listening to him talk, and this is a guy who I'll listen to him because he's an all-pro, Hall of Fame quarterback. He knows what, right. And he's given examples of having, like how Torrey Holt did it when they played together with the Rams, and how he constantly was getting on the guy that was with him in Arizona, Fitzgerald, to get up inside so that he could know that he can throw that route to him. There's things that are going on like that are causing issues. And a play down at the goal line, and it was one where Garoppolo throws it into a crowd of like three guys, and people on Twitter are talking about how it's Jimmy Garoppolo with another near interception. Well, and then you have a guy like Kurt Warner who's in there talking. He's like, where do you want him to throw the ball? He shouldn't. What is this concept? This guy's covered. This guy's covered. This guy's covered. They're all in a big bunch. I noticed the same thing when I did my film breakdown. It's like, I don't know what the concept was, like where they're supposed to go there. But what I did notice was you have two 49ers receivers within 5 yards of each other, one on top of the other. And then you had another one out here that's covered. What do you want him to do? And some of it's play design. He also talked about the sack, not the sack, the interception. And he says, the worst case, worst thing you can do is throw an interception right there. But he also says, all Garoppolo can really do on that play is take a sack, or
throw it away. But he's falling backwards. You really don't want him to put the ball up in the air.
Well,
he did it anyway, so
I know, I get it. But, and that's what he's saying. He said, this is what he said. It's a bad play.
Yeah.
And he also says, if Jimmy Garoppolo takes a sack right there, everybody's crushing him for taking a sack. And he's right. Because you know what the narrative is? If Jimmy Garoppolo takes a sack right there and the rest of the game plays out and the 49ers lose, you want to know what the narrative was going to be? It was going to be the same thing that it was regardless, that Jimmy Garoppolo cannot keep up with top-level quarterbacks, because they would have only been up by 2 right there. And that wasn't going to change the way that this game went. It just wasn't, especially with how good Kansas City moved the ball.
I mean, I think that's a fair narrative, though, when it comes to Jimmy Garoppolo. Like, when we say keep up with high-level quarterbacks, the reality is high-level quarterbacks are able to make plays when even the plays break down. And I don't know if Jimmy Garoppolo has that level of talent. And we see it week in and week out when either if it's a Mahomes or a Josh Allen. And look, there's a handful of quarterbacks. Majority of the quarterbacks are, not able to do that. We're talking about the top 3 to 5 quarterbacks that are out there. able to make plays and maybe win in spite of all of the things you mentioned. I don't think Jimmy has that ability to win in spite. Like, I think things have to go Jimmy's way for him to have a chance to win. And from what you're mentioning is if guys aren't getting open, if the play calling isn't where it needs to be, it's going to be a tough time for Jimmy to win. And I think that speaks to maybe some of the limitations, but I also think that's fair in the sense that, look, we know what Jimmy is. Kyle Shanahan knows what Jimmy is. These players know who Jimmy is. They have to do their part as a team to be able to win. And if that is winning, their routes more consistently, obviously holding on to the ball, catching it when the ball is thrown their way, and on Shanahan, be able to make sure that you're scheming the right plays at the right time. Everybody, I think, it needs to be doing a little bit better. I think it is unfair to just say Jimmy is the only reason why this team is losing. But I'm not here to make Jimmy out to be able to compete with these top level guys, because I think competing means with or without the play, if the play's breaking down and stuff like that, are you still able to make a play? And I don't know if Jimmy is that guy.
Well, I look, here's the way that I take it when you say those things. Not you, just the conversation of him being able to keep up. Okay. Well, at some point you either score if the other team is scoring every time they touch the ball, then you need to score every time they touch the ball. And that's, I would like to see how many quarterbacks win 40 plus games, when their defense gives up touchdowns on 6 or 7 possessions in a row, how many other quarterbacks win in those matchups? Because to say that, here's the other narrative that goes around with this team: the 49ers don't score in the second half, and that's really accurate. But on Sunday, they score 3, they're down by 5. Does their defense get a stop and get the ball back for the offense? No. Now it's instead of it, now it's 21-16. Now it's 28-16. Your offense goes down and makes it 28-23. Does your defense get a stop? Nope. They go right back down the score, and now it's 35-23. And then it snowballs from there because you get the guy decides to return it from 5 yards deep in the end zone, and you get called for a hold, and you get the sack in the end zone. And I would like to know, Jimmy Garoppolo is not going to make a play on that sack. He's just not. If Trey Lance is out there, maybe he takes off running to the left side. But with the routes that were being run, I don't know where people expected him to throw the ball as far as to a receiver. Maybe he throws it away. Maybe he is able to get out of the pocket and chuck it, if he steps up and rolls to his left and just throws it out of bounds or something. But Jimmy Garoppolo is not going to make a big play on that one. Trey Lance might be able to. But
I also, Jack, think, where at least from this narrative that you're talking about right now, you're using a lot of references from the Kansas City game. And I think that narrative is not being created just based off of that one game. I think you're right that Kansas City, all phases of the game, including all phases of coaching, failed. I don't think the 49ers won in any aspect of that game to where they deserved to win. Okay, but there's been plenty of times where the defense is doing their job, and Jimmy is not doing what he needs to do to help this team win. And I think that's where the narrative is. You're right. Against Kansas City, there was nothing to be done. But this is the only game that the 49ers defense has looked like this, right? Whereas this has been multiple games where Jimmy has looked like this. So I just gave you a little bit of pushback for the people that are about this narrative that's, I think, more of the case.
And I disagree with that. This was the first time we've seen this from the defense, because we saw this defense give up 3 touchdowns on 3 straight drives in week 1 against Chicago. Denver, awful performance. That was a bad game for Jimmy Garoppolo. Compare Jimmy Garoppolo's passing numbers against Denver to what Justin Herbert did. Now, is Jimmy Garoppolo Justin Herbert? No, but that shows you how good the Denver defense is, because Justin Herbert had a really hard day against them. He only put up 16 points at home in overtime. 16, maybe it was 19. I don't remember what it was, but it was low. And he had to throw the ball over 40 or 50 times in order to get to the numbers that he even got to. So the yards per attempt was not very good. Um, I don't know. Was it Jimmy Garoppolo? I mean, what I was going to ask is who are these quarterbacks that are outdueling Jimmy Garoppolo? Joe Burrow was in the Super Bowl. The 49ers beat Joe Burrow. The MVP of the Super Bowl is Matthew Stafford. The 49ers beat Matthew Stafford 2 out of 3 last year. And Jimmy Garoppolo played pretty good in both of those games. They were actually down 17-0. And what I remember is Jimmy Garoppolo led them down to tie the game up from down 7 with about a minute and a half to go. And that was after the comeback. I know you had the one drive that was great running. But there's lots of examples where Garoppolo can keep pace with guys. But you don't win games like you don't win a game that is a shootout against a top level team if your defense doesn't make a stop. In all those instances that I'm talking about, as far as the games with the Rams and so on, the 49ers got stops, and that's how they were able to win. You need to get a stop at some point. You can't have a defense that plays poorly. And this defense, 2 weeks in a row, has been unable to make stops when they need to. Against the Falcons, it was a quick drive, touchdown. You get a stop, you get back to a tight position in that game in the second quarter, midway through, and the Falcons drive right down the field on you and retake the lead. 3rd and 12, you allow the quarterback to sprint for 15 yards up the middle of the field. You don't make a stop. You let them come out in the start of the second half. They go right down the field on you. The 49ers in the last 2 weeks have allowed a passer rating of 140. They've allowed the opposing quarterbacks to complete 76% of their passes, 11.5 yards per attempt, 5 touchdowns. This 49ers defense is really good when they're playing against a team that's really bad, or either a quarterback that's bad, or they have an offensive line that can't protect them. I think this defense is a little overrated in our eyes.
Great segue. So obviously, I think that there's a lot of praise for DeMeco Ryans, and for rightfully so. I think he's done above average. I don't think he's the best defensive coordinator. He's definitely not the worst, and I think he's better than middle of the pack. However, we mentioned, I don't know if we did a show last week or was it 2 weeks ago, I mentioned who might be getting more praise than they deserve. And my pick was DeMeco Ryan. And I agree with you in the sense that there are some glaring holes with DeMeco Ryan that he hasn't been able to show he could fix. And one is the mobile quarterback. We faced 4 mobile quarterbacks, and all 4 have ended up in losses. And then, against Kansas City, just his inability to create a pass rush, which the pass rush was just pretty much non-existent against Kansas City the whole game. So the question that I wrote is, will DeMeco Ryan redeem himself this week? But I also want you to mention, what are the issues with DeMeco Ryan? What does he need to fix as far as from a defensive coordinator role?
Well, I think when you look at DeMeco Ryans, there are certain things that he does that are very similar to Kyle Shanahan. He's predictable in some ways. Like, for example, the second possession for Kansas City, 3rd and 1. Andy Reid knows he's going to get man coverage there because that's what the 49ers do. They get into man coverage, press man coverage in those types of situations all the time. He knows what he's going to get. He motions. He helps set it up by aligning Travis Kelce out wide and then motion him into the bunch. And by motioning him into the bunch, it shows everybody it shows that the 49ers are in man coverage, which already looked like it was anyway. The 49ers defense doesn't adjust. They decide they stick right on their men. They don't have any kind of adjustment. And that allows them just to it's just an easy pick of Tayshaun Gibson. Tayshaun Gibson has no chance because of the alignment and the fact that they didn't adjust. And is that DeMeco Ryans? Or is that the players? It doesn't really matter if it's the players because it's DeMeco Ryan's responsibility to make sure the players know how to adjust when that needs to be done. Just like it's Kyle Shanahan's responsibility to make sure that the offense is executing. It's Ryan's responsibility to make sure the defense is executing.
Yeah. What do you think is this issue that it seems like he has when it comes to mobile quarterbacks? Is that something that you're seeing as an issue, or is that just, look, there's not really too many defenses that know how to stop a mobile quarterback?
Well, when you're using a lot of twists and stunts to generate pressure, it's really easy for guys to lose their landmarks on the quarterback. When you in every rushing situation, you have specific areas on the quarterback that you should be targeting, whether it's the upfield shoulder, the downfield shoulder, those types of things. Maybe it's the number across those, whatever it is, to help with your rushing lanes. And you get a guy just a little bit out of position, and all of a sudden, instead of stepping up right into a defender, they're stepping up into a hole that's wide open that they can take off and exploit. And so it's a matter of having guys being able to have your players be aggressive, but also have your players maintain their responsibilities. And I think because they have to manufacture pressure so much that it makes it really tough. And it's think about it with Nick Bosa. We see him blow off the edge all the time. And Nick Bosa is a really good pass rusher. He also gets caught a lot in screens and traps and those types of things. He had a rough game. Like, he was one of the guys that had a rough game against Kansas City.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the defensive line losing as many players as they've lost, it's finally catching up to them as far as you're noticing that they're not as impactful as they have been earlier in the season. And maybe part of that is due to the level of talent now compared to the level of talent earlier on. But I do think that when you're losing guys like Armstead, Kinlaw, which are starters, and then you're moving guys up into those roles, now you're asking them to play a role that they may not be suited for. And what I mean by is not like, a lot of these backups are great in spot duty, but now when they're having to play more downs, more snaps earlier in the game, later in the game, they don't have the same gas tank to be able to be as fresh. And you're noticing in these last two losses that late in the game, the pass rush becomes non-existent and this defensive line becomes very porous. And I think that's just because the depth is gone. So hopefully Armstead could get back healthy and, start playing more consistently. And, some of these guys could get back healthy, because I think that a lot of the weaknesses in this defense, Jack, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, it all starts with the defensive line. So if the defensive line isn't impactful or isn't productive, then it shows throughout the rest of the defense as well. And I think a lot of that, the lack of defensive line play, is because they just don't have the depth that they're used to.
Yeah, I mean that's a part of it. They had trouble against Russell Wilson late in that game. I think they're healthy in that one. Week 2, I don't remember if anybody was lost. I think maybe Kinlaw was gone for a part of that one. But yeah, no, I mean, you're right I agree with you on the part of these guys that step up and they look really good in spurts. But when they're out there down in and down out, they show why they're backups instead of starters. I think that we're seeing some of that. Again, I go back to this game against Kansas City, and Kansas City did their biggest damage on runs outside the tackles, though, around the edge. You give up 3 touchdowns on a jet sweep, right? One of them was a pass because of the alignment. The other 3 were from under center. I don't think the Flyers ever touched Mecole Hardman on any of those 3 runs.
Yeah.
If they did, it was at the goal line on the last one, but he was pretty much, free. And how you see how do you not know that it's coming? I mean, that's what's hard, to look at it. Like, how do you, and also I got to say, the way that the Kansas City blocks that up, if you go back and you look at the way Kansas City's blocking those plays up and you compare it to the way the Flyers block those plays up, Cal Shanahan should take some notes, because I really like the way that Kansas City does it.
Well, I always say Andy Reid and Kyle Shanahan have a lot of similarities in their come up as coaches. Andy Reid obviously is established and has earned the offensive genius, quote unquote, title, I think. He definitely knows how to pick quarterbacks. Kyle Shanahan still has to prove that. But moving into, going to the other side of the ball, obviously Debo's not going to play. It just came out today. He's not going to play in this game, but CMC is going to have the full playbook. So even though you're losing Debo, you're getting CMC fully into the game. Do you believe CMC changes the way this offense looks?
Yeah, I think he has the potential to, because he's just a different back. The 49ers, now have a good second back or first back, however you want to say. If you want to keep Jeff Wilson as your first back and have McCaffrey be the change of pace, that's fine. But now you have two good ones. Before they didn't. They had one, Jeff Wilson Jr., and that was it. And they had a bunch of other guys. I mean, you're going from Tevin Coleman to Christian McCaffrey. That's a big boost for your offense. You can continue to throw guys at a defense, which makes, again, that makes what happened on Sunday just wild to me. But yes, he will change the way the offense looks. I don't know if we're going to see that necessarily this week because Deebo Samuel is out. So I'm not sure exactly, he's going to change it.
Jack, talk to us a little bit because, Deebo being out obviously is a big loss. He's a weapon for the 49ers, and obviously the offense in past years has looked way better when Deebo gets the ball often versus not. But for me, when I saw Deebo was out, I was actually, even when Deebo had the hamstring injury, I was kind of more comfortable just sitting him out this game because now we have CMC who can do a lot of or impact the game in a lot of ways like Deebo can impact the game. Can you talk a little bit about how maybe a guy like CMC now makes you more comfortable to rest a guy like Deebo and how the 49ers can still be explosive in the offense because CMC is there now?
How the other guys can be explosive because he is there?
Well, no, how like the offense can still be maybe I worded it wrong. So usually when Deebo's out, that leads to 49ers offense not being as explosive, right? There's been a big contrast. Well, now that CMC is there, it has made guys like me more comfortable thinking that the 49ers offense can still be explosive. Can you speak a little bit towards why that is and what CMC brings to an offense that can still keep it explosive even if a talent like Deebo isn't there?
It's going to be tough, because you're not going to use Christian McCaffrey isn't necessarily going to be running all the routes that Deebo. I don't think we're going to see Christian McCaffrey running dig routes, which we've seen Samuel be very successful against in facing the Rams. But you are going to see him getting, I think this week, you see him get those, become the screen guy instead of Samuel. It's going to be Christian McCaffrey that lines up out there. We saw it once last week against Kansas City. So I think you see him utilizing a lot of the same roles in the running game and in the screen game. Christian McCaffrey can take over all that stuff that we saw Deebo Samuel do last year. Where you lose is you don't have the guy in the receiving game for the little bit, the downfield throws, that 15, 20-yard range that you had when you had Deebo Samuel. So I think that's where you lose it. But in terms of the run game and the screen game, I think you don't lose anything there. I'd be surprised if we didn't see some snaps in this game with Christian McCaffrey and Jeff Wilson Jr. both on the field together.
Right.
Just because that's what we saw with Deebo Samuel, right? You get them both, and you'd have Deebo in the backfield and Jeff Wilson Jr. in the slot and those types of things. So I just think we're going to see a lot of the same things as we have in the past. And then when Deebo Samuel comes back after the bye and Elijah Mitchell's there, the 49ers are going to have three really good running backs and a couple of guys that can do a lot of different things. And I include Jeff Wilson Jr. as well in that running back, or Christian McCaffrey as well. I think Christian McCaffrey is very underrated in terms of just being a runner. Just put him in the offense and just let him run your normal offense because he's really good.
Right. CG Ruthless says, I'm hoping Danny Gray plays because we can figure out a way to involve him more, maybe jet sweeps or deep passes. I ask you, Jack, which receiver do you think gets the most snaps outside of obviously Jennings and Ayuk? Which receiver gets called up? Do you think, is it more Ray? Is it Danny Gray, or somebody else on the roster?
It's going to be Ray McLeod will probably be the first guy because that's typically what they do, right? But Danny Gray, I think, in terms of CJ's question here, um, you're probably going to see Gray. He's going to be active because they don't have any other receiver. So Gray's going to be active in this one. And you got to remember they used Brent Ayuk on one of these jet sweeps in week one. It was one of the first plays of the game. So I would expect to see they have a number of guys that can kind of fill in that role.
Jesse, can the 49ers overcome 3-5 again? And I don't think he means 3rd-5. I think he means the 3-5 record if the 49ers end up losing this game.
I probably not. It's not likely. Teams don't do that very often. I know people keep pointing to that, but I don't think that's a position you want to try to find out. The only reason that they might be able to is because the NFC is not very good, and they face a lot of teams in the NFC on the back end of their schedule. But you don't want to see that. If the 49ers I said before the season, if 49ers are 3-3 after the first 6 weeks, you're in trouble. And if they're 3-5, they're in big trouble because the Rams aren't very good.
Yeah. I tend to think that there's still a chance just because they could win the division and make the playoffs. And they've already got the tiebreaker against both Seattle and the Rams. So it's just about beating the Cardinals, right? So they have a good chance of being able to win the division and sneak in, even if they're under 500 or right at, a one game over 500. So I still think there's a chance, but I don't necessarily look at them as contenders if they're, if they're like that,
I'd have to look at the tiebreakers again because if the 49ers lose this game, now they don't have the head-to-head tiebreaker over the Rams. Depends on what happens up in Seattle. If Seattle wins and they're up 2 games ahead of the 49ers, that's a bad deal. I think Seattle's a much better team than people want to give them credit for. They keep winning. They're the ones, I think the 49ers have a better roster than Seattle, but the difference is the Seattle roster doesn't make the same stupid mistakes week after week that the 49ers do. 49ers do a really good job at talking about how good they are. They don't do a very good job of showing it on the field.
Yeah. And, I think coaching matters, and the Seattle coaches have proven to be good coaches, and we're still, it's still up in the air what Kyle Shanahan is as a coach, right? I think that we see potential, but has he been able to put it together over consistent seasons? We have yet to see that. So there is, I think, fair criticism when it comes to maybe the Seattle coaching is better than the 49ers at this point.
Yeah, it's really hard. You can't argue against the criticism. There are some criticism, some things that are being said about Shanahan that you can argue back against. But there's a lot that you can't because he hasn't won consistently. He hasn't put up points consistently. There's been a lack of consistency. So, when you're in a situation like this, people can take the shots, and it's really hard to say that you're wrong. I mean, there are some times, like I said, people will say certain things that you can't argue back, but at the same time, this is the point where you can't really say, well, no, you're wrong because they're, 3-5 or 3-4, whatever it is.
Men lie, women lie, numbers don't lie. So Jack, I would say pretty much every single position group against Kansas City underperformed to a certain extent, some to different levels than others. But the Rams is a game that the 49ers obviously get up for. Through the regular season, they've been dominant over this as far as like winning every single time they play against the Rams. So this can be a game where the 49ers feel comfortable and, they can look really good as they have in previous years. Which position group do you expect to recover the best against the Rams?
Probably the defensive line, because they're going up against a group that isn't very good when it comes to run blocking. We haven't, at least in the first time around, the Rams didn't show the ability to get any kind of push, and they haven't really run the ball well at all this year. So I think the defensive line might look better just because they're able to if they can do their job and shut down the run, they can pin their ears back a little bit more. Stafford can move, but he's not a guy that you're necessarily going to worry about scrambling all over on you. You still have to be, sound in your rush lanes and those types of things. But I think we probably see the defensive line step up. And if the defensive line steps up, you're going to see the linebackers and the DBs look better.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with you. I think the defensive line looks a lot better. I think overall every position group is going to be a lot better. I expect the rushing attack, even though they did look good against Kansas City, you mentioned they averaged 5 yards per carry. I do expect the 49ers and Kyle Shanahan specifically, to really lean on that run game now, especially with CMC back there. I could see this being an extremely dominant run first kind of offense and get back to the old Kyle Shanahan, right? Where it was a run first offense and then you pass, the run sets up the pass versus the pass setting up the run, which it seems like he's been trying this season at least. So I expect a big day out of the rushing game. I wanted to get your opinion. Obviously, Verrett was brought up from the PUP list IR. How much play do you think does Verrett start alongside Ward, or do you think he's going to get any snaps? How do you think Verrett's being utilized against the Rams, or do they save him till after the bye week?
I think it's most likely that they're going to save him till after the bye week. I think that's seems to be the direction that they're playing things a little bit on the safe side with guys for the most part. They, especially when they're on turf. We saw them do it with Nick Bosa in Atlanta. I think we're going to see him do it with Jason Verrett this week, and we'll see how it works out. I've got some. I think my opinion of what the 49ers are doing in their secondary is different than most. I think that this discussion that's going on with Jimmy Ward is wild. And Jimmy Ward, I don't think Jimmy Ward gives them a better guy at nickel than what they had before.
Right.
That's my piece of, we saw him get run around on Sunday. And for me, if you could get Jason Verrett and Travarius Ward along with Diameter Lenore, and then you have the same two guys in the backfield, I think that's the best defense the 49ers put out there. This week, because you're down Dre Greenlaw. Maybe Jimmy Ward really kind of play a little bit more dime type of look, and he's more of your linebacker safety guy. Jimmy Ward right now. The way they're working with him is he's turning into the 2017 version of Eric Reed.
Do you feel like this is a sign that maybe Jimmy Ward isn't in the future plans for the 49ers?
It's looked that way all off season to me. I wrote about it early on, about guys that might not be coming back, and he was one of the 5 that I said, keep an eye on this one not changing for a guy that's as valuable, that seemed as valuable to the team as Ward. I always thought it was interesting that we didn't hear anything about a contract with him in the offseason. It's usually easier to get those kind of deals done a year ahead of time instead of a year later. The fact that nothing happened there, Ward might have gambled on himself, saying, I'm going to go out there and do it again and get more money. And who knows what's happening. It's a really interesting situation.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, the resurgence of Hufanga, and I think getting what we're getting out of Gibson, I think people are looking at maybe Jimmy Ward is replaceable. However, we did mention that a lot of the success from the defense may have been due to level of competition versus actual ability. I think it's still to be determined how good that safety duo is, because clearly they weren't dominant against the Chiefs. And there's going to be a run of, especially after the bye week, of very good offenses that the 49ers are going to go up against to see if they could still be able to do that. But we'll get you out of here on this one, Jack. It's obviously a very important game on Sunday. Not only for standings and rankings, but also for pride, because nobody wants to lose to a division rival, especially the people that knocked you out of the Super Bowl last season. What is your prediction, though, going into the game? Who do you think wins this, and what type of game do you expect to see?
I'm going to make this as an easy one. I'll be quick on it. I'm going to say 49ers 23, Rams 20. The team that wins is going to be the team that turns the ball over less. If they both turn it over the same number of times, the 49ers are going to figure out a way to squeak it out.
I love it. I love it. So you're expecting a close victory.
Yes.
I love it. Well, guys, that is the show. Jack, I'm excited to see you this weekend. I had no idea you were going to be at the game. So we definitely need to game plan where we're going to meet up and whatnot. I want to thank everybody in the chat section for being active. Absolutely. You guys helped the show move forward. Jack, I know it's Friday, so I don't know how much more streaming you're doing before the game, but I do want to give you some time to plug your channel and what to expect from your writing and your YouTube channel.
Well, you'll get over on my as far as the writing, I'm actually working right now on my pregame write up, so that's going to be coming out either later today or early tomorrow. There's been some good stuff over there, I think, this week in terms of I did a big breakdown as to what the problem is for the 49ers and why they're under 500 currently. That's up over at the Press Democrat. The piece I did yesterday was on Jimmy Garoppolo and do the 49ers trust Jimmy Garoppolo, because that seems to be a big topic of conversation, as does the lack of trust between Jimmy Garoppolo and Kyle Shanahan, which I find really interesting when you look at the play calling from the head coach. So those are a couple of things that you can go take a look at now if you haven't already. And then, like I said, the pregame one will be coming up either today or tomorrow. And then on Sunday before the game, I'll jump on my channel with a quick pregame show, and then there'll be another one afterwards.
Maybe I'll photobomb your YouTube stream since I'm gonna be there. Probably not sober at that game, but Jack, I appreciate you coming on. Guys, like I said, like I always say, stay safe, stay hydrated, and we'll talk again very, very soon. Go Niners.